The toll on the soldiers. The human cost of Verdun extended beyond physical casualties. The psychological strain on the soldiers was immense. The term shell shock emerged during World War I to describe the mental trauma experienced by those exposed to the constant bombardments. Shell shock, now recognized as a form of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, manifested in various ways, including uncontrollable shaking, inability to reason, paralysis, blindness or deafness without a physical cause, and severe depression and anxiety. Many soldiers suffered from nightmares, anxiety, and debilitating fatigue. The constant presence of death and the gruesome conditions eroded morale. Letters home often censored the worst details, but diaries and accounts revealed the depth of despair. One French soldier wrote, "We are no longer living beings. We are specters, shadows haunting the ruins of what was once a world. Hope has abandoned us, and we exist only to endure. Each day blends into the next, an endless cycle of shelling, mud, and death. I fear I will never be the man I once was, even if I survive this hell." The psychological impact of the battle extended far beyond the war years. Many veterans struggled to reintegrate into civilian life, haunted by their experiences. The French term ceux de Verdun, those of Verdun, came to describe a generation marked by the battle's trauma. Desertion and self-inflicted wounds became issues for military authorities. By 1916, the French army had already dealt with mutinies and a crisis of morale. At Verdun, the intensity of the fighting and the seemingly endless nature of the battle pushed many to their breaking point. Punishments were harsh, with some soldiers executed as a deterrent. The French army carried out 600 executions during the war, many for desertion or cowardice. However, as the battle wore on, military authorities began to recognize the impact of combat stress, and more compassionate approaches were sometimes employed. Yet, despite the hardships, camaraderie among the troops provided a lifeline. Shared suffering forged bonds that helped many endure the unendurable. Soldiers relied on dark humor and small acts of kindness to maintain their sanity. One veteran recalled, "We laughed at things that would have horrified us before the war. It was our way of coping. We shared our last bit of bread, our last drop of water. In that hell, the man next to you was more than a comrade. He was your brother, your lifeline to humanity." The homefront and propaganda. Back in France, Verdun became a rallying point for national unity. The government and media portrayed the battle as a heroic defense against a ruthless invader. Propaganda posters urged citizens to support the war effort, buy war bonds, and conserve resources. The French government, recognizing the symbolic importance of Verdun, launched a massive propaganda campaign. Posters depicted valiant French soldiers standing firm against the German onslaught, often accompanied by slogans like "They shall not pass" and "Verdun, the frontier of civilization." Newspapers provided daily updates on the battle, though these were heavily censored and often overly optimistic. The journal L'Illustration published dramatic illustrations of the fighting, creating a romanticized image of the battle for those at home. Women stepped into roles left vacant by men who had gone to the front. They worked in factories, producing munitions and supplies vital for the war. The image of Rosie the Riveter, though more associated with World War II, had its roots in this period. Women also served as nurses, both at home and near the front lines, dealing with the horrific injuries inflicted by modern warfare. The war brought numerous hardships, including food shortages, rationing, and constant fear of bad news from the front. Civilians endured strict rationing of food and fuel, nighttime blackouts to guard against air raids, inflation, economic struggles, and the emotional toll of worrying about loved ones at the front. In Germany, the government also used Verdun to bolster support, highlighting supposed victories and downplaying losses. Propaganda emphasized the bravery of German soldiers and the strategic importance of the offensive. However, as the battle dragged on with no decisive outcome, public fatigue and skepticism grew. The German home front faced similar challenges to France, with food shortages becoming particularly acute due to the British naval blockade. The turnip winter of 1916-1917 saw widespread malnutrition and hardship among German civilians. Internationally, the protracted battle drew attention and concern. Allies like Britain and Russia recognized the strain on France and sought ways to alleviate it. This led to coordinated offensives elsewhere, such as the Battle of the Somme, intended to divert German resources from Verdun. The Battle of Verdun also had diplomatic repercussions. Neutral countries, particularly the United States, were horrified by the scale of the carnage. Reports from journalists and diplomats contributed to a growing anti-war sentiment in these nations, though it would take another year before the US entered the conflict. The turning tide. By mid-1916, the dynamics of the war were shifting. The Battle of the Somme, launched by British and French forces on July 1st, forced Germany to divert troops from Verdun. The Somme offensive, while costly for the Allies, achieved its strategic objective of relieving pressure on Verdun. Additionally, Russia's Brusilov offensive on the Eastern Front further stretched German resources. This massive attack, launched on June 4th, saw Russian forces advance up to 150 kilometers, inflicting heavy casualties on Austro-Hungarian and German forces. The need to reinforce the Eastern Front meant fewer reserves were available for operations at Verdun. Recognizing an opportunity, General Robert Nivelle, who had succeeded Pétain at Verdun, planned a counter-offensive. Nivelle, known for his aggressive tactics, believed that carefully coordinated artillery and infantry attacks could break the stalemate. With improved artillery tactics, including the use of creeping barrages, the French aimed to retake lost ground. The creeping barrage was a significant innovation. It involved artillery fire that moved forward at a preset pace, just ahead of the advancing infantry. This provided a moving wall of explosions to suppress enemy defenses, allowing the infantry to advance with some protection. While not always perfectly executed, it represented a major improvement in coordinating artillery and infantry actions. On October 24th, the French launched a massive attack. Preceded by a devastating artillery bombardment, French troops advanced behind a wall of fire. The assault was successful, and by November 2nd, Fort Douaumont was back in French hands. Fort Vaux followed on November 2nd. The recapture of Fort Douaumont was a significant morale boost for the French. The fort, which had fallen almost without a fight in February, was retaken after a fierce battle. The French 38th Division, led by General Charles Mangin, spearheaded the attack. Mangin famously declared, "Messieurs, we attack tomorrow for France, capture Douaumont." These victories boosted French morale and signaled that the tide had turned. The German High Command, facing mounting pressures on multiple fronts, began to reconsider the value of continuing the Verdun offensive. Falkenhayn's strategy of bleeding France white had failed. Instead, both sides had suffered enormous casualties, and the German army was now on the defensive. On August 29th, Falkenhayn was replaced as chief of the German General Staff by Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg, with General Erich Ludendorff as his deputy. The end of the Inferno. As winter approached, the Battle of Verdun drew to a close. On December 18th, after 303 days of relentless combat, the fighting subsided. Both sides were exhausted, having suffered appalling losses for minimal territorial gain. The final toll was staggering, with French casualties around 377,000, including 162,000 killed, and German casualties similarly high at 337,000, with 143,000 killed. Although the exact numbers are debated, the human cost is undeniable. An average of 70,000 casualties per month, roughly 300 per day, with the combined total equaling the population of a city like New Orleans. Verdun had become the longest battle in modern history, a symbol of the war's senseless slaughter. The front lines had shifted by only a few miles, and the strategic situation remained largely unchanged. The landscape was unrecognizable, pockmarked with shell craters and littered with the detritus of war. The battle had consumed vast quantities of material. It's estimated that over 60 million artillery shells were fired during the course of the battle. This averages to over 100 shells per square meter in the battle area. The ground was so saturated with unexploded ordnance that large tracts of land were deemed uninhabitable. Aftermath and reflections. In the aftermath, both nations grappled with the consequences. For France, the battle became a symbol of national pride and sacrifice. General Pétain was hailed as the hero of Verdun, though his legacy would later become controversial due to his role in World War II. The battlefield was so devastated that entire villages were wiped off the map and never rebuilt. These villages that died for France were granted special status, with appointed mayors to maintain their memory. Areas were declared Zone Rouge, or red zones, deemed uninhabitable due to unexploded ordnance and contamination. Even today, these areas bear the scars of the conflict. The Zone Rouge initially covered over 200 square kilometers, 460 esquimalt, and while much has been reclaimed, some areas remain off-limits more than a century later. The French government established memorials and cemeteries to honor the fallen. The Douaumont ossuary, completed in 1932, houses the remains of over 130,000 unidentified soldiers from both sides. It stands as a somber reminder of the war's toll. The ossuary's tower, rising 46 meters, 151 feet, is visible for miles around, its eternal flame a testament to the sacrifice of those who fought and died at Verdun. For Germany, Verdun was a bitter disappointment. Falkenhayn was replaced by Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff, who shifted strategies. The failure to break the French at Verdun contributed to a reassessment of German war aims and tactics. The battle also influenced military thinking, as the heavy casualties with minimal gains highlighted the futility of attrition warfare. This led to innovations in tactics and technology later in the war, including improved coordination between infantry and artillery, the development of stormtrooper tactics, and advancements in aerial warfare. Verdun in memory and culture. Verdun left an indelible mark on French culture and collective memory. It became a subject of literature, art, and film. Writers like Henri Barbusse, who served at Verdun, penned works that captured the grim reality of trench warfare. Barbusse's novel Le Feu, Under Fire, published in 1916, was one of the first to depict the horrors of trench warfare realistically. It won the Prix Goncourt and was widely read, helping to shape public perception of the war. The phrase "Ils ne passeront pas" endured as a symbol of defiance. It was later used in other conflicts, most notably by Republican forces during the Spanish Civil War, "No passerán." Monuments across France commemorate the battle, and annual ceremonies honor the sacrifice of those who fought. The Verdun Memorial, inaugurated in 1967, is one of the most important war museums in France. It receives over 500,000 visitors annually. In Germany, Verdun was less celebrated but remained a poignant reminder of the war's cost. German veterans associations often focused on honoring the fallen rather than glorifying the battle itself. The shared suffering led to moments of reconciliation in later years. In 1984, French President François Mitterrand and German Chancellor Helmut Kohl stood hand in hand at Verdun, symbolizing Franco-German friendship and a commitment to peace. This powerful gesture, captured in a famous photograph, became an iconic symbol of European reconciliation. Kohl later reflected on the moment, "We stood there hand in hand for a long time. Words were unnecessary. The gesture spoke for itself." This act of reconciliation was not an isolated incident. Over the years, Verdun has become a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand the war and its legacy. Joint French-German commemorations have become regular events, emphasizing the shared history and the importance of maintaining peace in Europe. Lessons from Verdun. The Battle of Verdun serves as a stark lesson on the perils of total war. It exemplifies how nationalist fervor and strategic miscalculations can lead to catastrophic consequences. The battle highlighted the disconnect between military leadership and the realities faced by soldiers on the ground. Falkenhayn's strategy of attrition, while theoretically sound from a strategic perspective, failed to account for the human cost and the resilience of the French defenders. Similarly, the French High Command's initial neglect of Verdun's defenses nearly led to disaster. Verdun exposed the inadequacies of traditional tactics in the face of modern weaponry. The dominance of defensive firepower, particularly machine guns and artillery, rendered large-scale infantry assaults obsolete. This lesson, though costly, would influence military doctrine in the years to come. The battle also underscored the importance of logistics, morale, and adaptability. Pétain's emphasis on troop rotation and supply lines proved critical in sustaining the defense. The Voie Sacrée demonstrated the crucial role of efficient logistics in modern warfare. The psychological impact of prolonged intense combat became evident at Verdun. The emergence of shell shock as a recognized condition forced military and medical authorities to confront the mental health challenges posed by modern warfare. This recognition, though limited at the time, laid the groundwork for future advancements in understanding and treating combat-related psychological trauma. Verdun also highlighted the growing importance of technology in warfare. The battle saw the use of aircraft, tanks, in its later stages, and advanced artillery, pointing towards the increasingly mechanized nature of future conflicts. Perhaps most importantly, Verdun symbolizes the resilience of the human spirit amidst unimaginable adversity. The soldiers on both sides endured conditions that tested the limits of endurance, yet they continued to fight, driven by duty, patriotism, or simply the will to survive. A French veteran reflecting on the battle years later said, "At Verdun, we learned the true meaning of endurance. We faced death every moment, yet we held on. It was not about victory or defeat, but about survival and honor. We fought not just for France, but for humanity itself." Verdun today. Today, Verdun is a place of pilgrimage and reflection. The once devastated landscape has been reclaimed by nature, but remnants of the battle remain. Trenches, forts, and shell craters are preserved as historical sites, offering visitors a tangible connection to the past. The Verdun Memorial Museum, renovated in 2016 for the battle's centenary, provides a comprehensive and immersive experience for visitors. It houses a vast collection of artifacts and utilizes modern technology to tell the story of the battle and its impact. Key sites that visitors can explore include Fort Douaumont, the Douaumont Ossuary, the destroyed village of Fleury-devant-Douaumont, the Trench of Bayonets, the Verdun Memoria. These sites collectively receive hundreds of thousands of visitors each year, including many school groups. The emphasis is on education and remembrance, with a focus on promoting peace and understanding. The battlefield itself continues to yield artifacts and human remains. Each year, the Département du Déminage, Department of Mine Clearance, recovers and disposes of about 40 tons of unexploded ordnance. The work is dangerous and ongoing, a reminder of the battle's enduring physical legacy. The environmental impact of the battle is still evident. The Zone Rouge has shrunk over the years as land has been reclaimed, but some areas remain too contaminated for human use. These zones have become de facto nature reserves, home to unique ecosystems that have adapted to the altered landscape. A quote from a recent visitor captures the enduring impact of Verdun. "Standing here where so many fought and died, you can't help but be moved. It's not just about France or Germany anymore. It's about all of us, about the price of war and the value of peace." Verdun speaks to us across the years, urging us to remember and to learn. The Battle of Verdun remains etched in history as a symbol of the tragic cost of war. It was a battle without victors, only survivors bearing the weight of loss and memories of unimaginable horror. As we reflect on Verdun, we honor the courage and sacrifice of those who fought and died. Their stories serve as a powerful reminder of the value of peace and the profound consequences when it is lost.